Good morning and welcome to the Clear View. I'm Nick Bautista. This week we're talking China's Evergrande fail. Stay tuned. So if you haven't seen it in the news already, it's out there if you go looking for it. But over the past couple weeks, probably last 2 weeks or so, the news came out about Evergrande, which is a Chinese real estate developer there in China, has essentially gone belly up. And so there have been a lot of questions around the ability for them to stay afloat. A lot of similarities tied to the 2008 2009 crisis here, mainly because it's real estate, and Evergrande's a huge real estate developer in China. So what the big news and headlines have been around have been, if it affects their people there in China, what's the likelihood that it's going to spread across the entire globe and affect financial markets, economies outside of China? So if we want to take a deeper dive into what all this looks like, first we have to start with what exactly went down, what exactly happened, and how did they end up here in this position. So like most things, companies, especially on the real estate side, are going in, borrowing a lot of money to what they call leverage up, right? To get more assets, to use up more of other people's dollars to buy up those assets so that they can hold them, then later either turn them over for a profit or essentially rent them out and use them as a way to generate profits. Once they generate those profits, they can then pay off the debt and continue the cycle on and on. But it's a way for them to essentially grow and fast forward their growth by taking on a lot of debt, because it speeds up the process because they don't have the money, and so they're going out and borrowing in the market. So what ended up happening is the company just ended up starting to borrow a lot more than they could afford to service, in terms of they had way too much in debt. They were doing, at least what looks like, some reports showing some shadow banking and trying to use some creative loan tactics to, again, create cash flow to keep and continue to build a lot of the properties that they were developing. And so it kind of just avalanched and snowballed from there, that it got pretty much out of control and they couldn't service or handle it. So they've been reaching out to the government saying, hey, we're in trouble here and we're this huge real estate company and we need some help. And so it kind of went back again to echoes of 2008, 2009, where they're going back to the government saying, hey, we're too big to fail. Please don't let us fail. How can you help us out and come alongside so that this doesn't roil the financial markets? And so the big question then is, would this impact markets? And if so, would it impact outside of China? And so in my view, it seems to be mostly contained within China. Number one, the fact that they're not a financial company, right? So this Evergrande is not, it's a real estate developer. They don't have essentially financial products. They're using different financial products for their own funding and buying, to develop the real estate property, but they're not an actual financial company like Bear Stearns or something like that, at JP Morgan, where they're going in making a majority of these loans. And so what could end up happening, though, is the companies that did make a lot of these loans could end up kind of losing their hands on the deal, coming back, either restructuring a lot of the debts, losing out on some of the value that they've received by taking on a lot of the debt to these real estate developers. And so when you think about the flip side of the coin, if you're the one who is lending the money out to some of these companies, you expect a certain return of interest from these companies who are borrowing money from you. And so a lot of those types of companies that were in and around China who are lending to them, they're the ones who will probably end up getting burned. Now, does this spread outside of China into the global financial system? That's kind of remains to be seen. However, it doesn't appear to be a big contagion factor outside of the China walls, essentially. In the US, you can talk about maybe there's some banks such as JP Morgan or those types of lenders who have gotten into some of the real estate side of things in China. But the big question is, even if they're not a financial company, is this real estate developer, Evergrande, really tuned in and is a big cog in the economic system, not just for China, but across the world? And it doesn't appear that they are. It appears that they're pretty localized, even though they're a massive, massive company. It appears that since they're a real estate developer and they're localized, that it's not going to really affect some of the outside world. Now, it'll affect China in general, right? A lot of the homeowners who had put deposits down for properties, and now they may lose all their deposits, and so that may create a lot of social unrest that could lead to some things there in China that it could kind of ramp up some of the downturn over there. But in terms of here in the U.S., how does that affect us? For the real estate either that we're invested in or the real estate funds that we use that invest in, most of those types of funds and companies aren't primarily looking to China to invest in real estate. They're doing a lot more US based investing. And so it appears that it's going to be almost a non-factor in terms of how does this big event that just happened kind of spread across the globe. And so we don't see it really posing a huge risk. There may be some hiccups along the way, but overall the world has learned from what happened in 2008 and 2009, and there have been some of that banking restrictions even across the globe kind of spread and make sure that these companies are requiring a lot more information to write the loans, to do the underwriting. And so that materially didn't affect Evergrande in this case. It was they tried to use outside ways of getting financing to speed up their growth in a really fast way, and that kind of came back to bite them. So in the end, the main reason that we don't feel like this is going to spread outside of China is that they're not a strategically important financial institution. They don't have a lot of interconnections with other financial institutions, that would essentially undermine the liquidity of the Chinese financial system. Other than that, some of the other big news that came out this week was we saw that there's going to be, for 2022, there's going to be almost a 6% increase, cost of living increase for Social Security, which is definitely one of the biggest ones in history of the program. So for those of you who are collecting Social Security, you will see a pretty decent sized increase starting in 2022. And that was in direct effect from the inflation numbers that have been coming out and that we've been talking about the past 2 weeks, about how the inflation numbers have really been skyrocketing, a large part due to the energy crisis, where oil's ramped up. You'll start to see more of that going into the winter months. Natural gas prices will definitely be creeping up. There was a report today about that I had seen, can't remember where it was from, that showed essentially for those of us, heating up our houses, well, not so much here in Orange County, California, but, across the U.S., you'll most likely see an increase. I think it was around 30% in the cost of your heating bill due to a lot of those pricing pressures. So we see that still in view of what's going on with the economy in the short term in terms of inflation still being at high levels, somewhere around 5%. Especially with a lot of the supply chain still coming back online. I mean, you can see it there in the port, at least here in Orange County, all the ships still waiting in the harbor for all the containers to be offloaded, right? So there's still a lot of that supply chain issue that's been going on since COVID and from the cause of COVID. And all of that will lead us to, some of that pricing pressure in the near term, although we don't see materially in the long term it having a big impact as things start to come online, start to come through, and workers start building all of these hours back into their work day to get these things moving, get them offloaded, and get the supply chain running again now that, especially with Christmas coming up. So I guess that's the dire warning is, possibly start looking into your Christmas shopping early this year, because shipping times, at least more so recently, have been a lot more delayed. So start thinking about getting those presents early and making sure that you're doing your shopping so that you don't miss out on the perfect gift. So that's all I got for you this week. More of a shorter video, but more so around the Evergrande and how that has really affected a lot of the market there in China, and how we don't see it truly affecting us here in the US. It's kind of a business as usual. But if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, give it a subscribe, and if you got questions or you want me to talk about other topics that you've seen in the headlines that have been on your mind, please let me know. Send me an email. I'd be more than happy to dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics and really get you an answer on any or all of the above. So until next week, have a great rest of your week and weekend, and we'll see you then.